um, and provide an engagement that impacts underserved people. And when I look at linking these, what it is developing mindsets within students, entrepreneurial mindset, innovative mindset, problem-solving mindsets, by exposing students to real challenges that involve real people, and to have a tangible impact. And I want to unpack these different pieces on kind of what that means. A theme I'm going to hit is that last horizontal arrow. It's actually tangible impact. There are multiple times that we in higher education have used underserved communities as project context. We will have meetings with community, we'll take time from them to develop a project, but we don't actually see things through to the point where the community gets a value. And that's one of the things that we can improve. I want to share just briefly kind of my journey, because honestly, I did not get into engineering education to do this work. I was a very happy designer. In fact, my master's advisor and I had I can say argument, because he thought I'd get a PhD sometime, and I adamantly said, absolutely no way, I'm never going to get a PhD. He laughed hysterically years later when I asked him for a letter of reference. I was very happy. I love my job as a designer in industry, but one of the things that I was doing is going back into the university to help recruit graduates. And in industry, what happened 30 years ago when I was there, and still happens, is industry critiques what we do in engineering education. There's got to be a better way to produce graduates that are better prepared. And I was, as part of that, I thought, I could go in and be part of the education process to help us meet what we in industry need. And I was totally industry focused. And actually, and what I did was I designed jet engines and thought I can go prepare future jet engine designers. Well, I was assigned to EPICS way back in 1998 as just a course, and I thought it was going to be a fun little class, because what the students did is they did things that didn't look like my jet engine. They did things like, these pictures are from a sailboat that was designed that children with a severe disability could operate the sailboat with just a joystick or a sip and puff, a straw switch. And that can actually be the captain of the ship and steer the ship. What I didn't see and what I missed was, if I wanted to prepare students for industry, I could have them work on these projects, because it was a real project. It was a tough problem. It required a multidisciplinary approach, and it had real users that would give us feedback and change what they were doing. And this has changed my view of engineering education. I still believe what I'm doing is preparing students for traditional industry, but I don't believe I'm preparing traditional students for that industry, that I'm preparing students that have a sense of how their work fits into the larger global context, that are aware of human and environmental issues and rights. They want to be leaders in ethics as well as the technical. They're able to work with diverse teams and bring people together. The very skills that industry is asking. I actually had, just to complete this circle, we had some of the chief engineers at GE Aviation touring our labs. They stood in front of this sailboat design as the students were presenting their work. And the project leader, who at that time was a third-year student, the chief engineer at GE Aviation turned to his team and said, "Get her resume, we need to hire her." She didn't even have the right disciplinary background, but he said, these are the kinds of people that I need. And we've done research. So I am a professor in engineering education now, and some of the research that we showed is these kinds of experiences look different than what our graduates see out in industry. But when they get into those experiences, they said, you know what, I've kind of done this before. And it gives them more confidence. Their managers talk about how they're better equipped to handle things because they don't make some of the beginner mistakes. And so even though these projects look different, they're actually developing those fundamental skills, those mindsets that industry needs. There was another set of research that we did, and there are actually two different studies that we did where we looked at how practicing engineers and students move from novice to expert. And one of the studies looked at design, human-centered design. The other was actually looking in the aerospace industry on how people handled complexity and ambiguity. And we found very similar things. If you look at the novices and experts, you could put them in groups and they ended up in be able to plot them on two axes. And one of the axes was the technical. The other axis was interacting with people, understanding users and team members. Now, one of my graduate students was very distraught when we got the data and we sorted it this way because she didn't want to do she wanted to do her thesis just on a technical thing and not involving people. And what emerged from the data was to advance technically, you had to understand how to work with people and different people's perspectives. What we do a lot in traditional education is we think students will move horizontally, and then at some point they'll learn how to work with people. And what the research shows is engineers develop at a diagonal. So we actually limit the technical sophistication that students can achieve if we're not integrating them with people. So what they need is they need experiences that integrate people and technology. And the kinds of experiences literally are within our communities. And I want to highlight just some areas that are opportunities. One of them is education. And when I talk about this work in education, very often I'll get people that say, oh yeah, our students go over and they talk to this primary school. And that's not what I'm talking about. That may be an activity. And I might send students over there to do an activity in a school. But they're doing it to get information because we're also designing something else that it could be, you know, in the bottom left there's a rudimentary video learning system. That's a picture from a project team in India that looked at a village school and said, are there things that we could do to help supplement the math and science education in the village? And they had to create some communication networks to be able to connect and do some mentoring. There are hands-on pieces that we can do. There's software things to get students that you can create customized quizzing games and things that students could use to improve the learning. In the bottom right is a project that we started in Haiti that we're continuing with some Indian colleagues, and I think has applicability in a lot of countries, is mobile science labs. A lot of the rural schools don't have the kind of sophisticated science equipment that some of the more wealthy areas have. So if and it may just not be practical to put them out in all these schools, but you could put things that could work remotely and be distributed. And so we're looking at what science kits could be that could be rotated across schools. The environment and sustainability, there are a wealth of projects and things from looking at issues around sustainable communities, applications for alternative energy. Looking at campus sustainability, when we look at this work, your own campuses or our own campuses can be examples of can be test beds, that there's been some really exciting work that's been done where students have created demonstration facilities on technology. When I think of some projects that I've seen in Latin America and in Asia, where the campuses have developed newer technologies and test beds, and then they could bring farmers or other people in to actually see how these could be, and then adapt them to their own settings. One of the advantages of doing things on the campus is if we mess things up, we're doing it internally, and we're not impacting other people off campus. Looking at this last week, we were down looking at housing that's affordable and also disaster resistant, with climate change and the increase in severe weather. It is looking at how do we develop designs that are sustainable and affordable that can withstand some of these things. Food issues, food distribution. We work with some of the communities, and the term is food sovereignty. It is how can they develop food supplies for themselves. I'll share an example that's really touched me. When I talk about underserved communities, often we think of poor communities, but when I think of an underserved population globally, it's people with disabilities. There are places I've visited and taken students, and they've said, it's like, wow, they don't seem to have many people with disabilities around here. And I said, they're hidden. There are many, many challenges, and people with disabilities, often include elderly. I was in a community once where the poor families lived up the mountain and with the water, and if you got to an age where you can't climb the mountain or climb the steps, you don't have access to food and things. So looking at opportunities to impact people's lives. There are opportunities to impact young people. One of the exciting projects that is one of our teams here at Purdue is partnered with is looking at developing coding, programming lessons in materials that are appropriate for deaf, hearing impaired learners. So if I think about professions that would be wonderful for people who are deaf or have significant hearing impairments, programming seems like it would be ideal, but the instructional materials, the educational materials are not always appropriate for the deaf community. And so there are opportunities for us to open opportunities there and to touch lives with those. For me, this work, I continue to learn, and one of the things that I've really been touched is it exposed me to kind of my mindset. I think I'm a pretty good engineer. And as engineers, we tend to think of here's the project, here's the product, we want to get it done. If I look historically, there are times where we as a technical community, if we had paused and looked at some of the larger issues, I think there are many cities I've been to, especially within my country here in the US, where you just look at where they put the freeways, expressways, we'd call them interstate highways, where they've gone through the cities and they didn't pay attention to the communities and have split communities and shattered communities and actually contributed to some of the poverty. Last week when I was down in around the Gulf Coast. They've created just these networks of canals that are long and straight to get water out, and it's changed the ecosystem and damaged the ecosystem. So, there are times where we're efficient, and other times that we need to think about the relationships and the people. One of the most influential relationships that I've had has been with one of our native people. For those of you outside the United States was inhabited by indigenous people that, for the most part, have been moved off of their traditional lands, and if they've been given lands, are lands that are not very valuable. And so we've worked with some of the tribes, but one of them is the Aglola Lakota, and specifically looking at food sovereignty. The ironic thing is the land that they were given. So the Lakota people were not farmers traditionally. They have what the land that they're given is in what's referred to as the breadbasket of America. So it's in general very fertile land, but the land that they were given, the areas that could be farmed were sold off decades ago. And so the land the tribe still has doesn't have much land that can grow food. And so they actually live in what is called a food desert. They have very limited access to things like fruits and vegetables, and their health issues with the people. So we've been looking at what we can do with agriculture, looking at what we can do with greenhouses to increase food production, and also as part of education and culture. It is that the cultural part is looking at what we can do to help the people reestablish some of their culture and be able to pass their culture on. I put in that the Ford Motor Company has provided some support here, and it was a reminder to me to say, when we're doing this effort, we don't talk to the companies enough about being partners in this work. I see a lot of schools, institutions where they say, well, we're doing this project for this industry partner and we've got a relationship. What we have found is there are a lot of companies that will fund this kind of work to get access to the students, that the projects they'd like to fund, they would like to fund things, and they would like to contribute to something that's going to benefit the education and give the students a good experience so that they can hire them. In a lot of places, they've also got CSR funds, corporate social responsibility monies, and investing in these kinds of projects can actually check multiple boxes. So we have a lot of partners where the companies will partner with us just like they would in other scenarios with an industry project, but instead of the resulting report going to the company, the product goes to the community, and we've been very successful with that. Now, when we work with partners, and I mentioned the impact to the community, because when I get in meetings with community members and talk about the expectations that they have when they work with student groups, I still remember a meeting I had, boy, it's probably about 15 years ago, but we were in a meeting and I was asking the community members, it wasn't my campus, but I was visiting a thing, to say, what when you start a partnership with a student team, what's your expectation for the products and that you're going to receive? And the answer actually was laughter. They said, oh, we don't expect we're going to get anything. And this conversation really haunted me, because we're working with NGOs that are financially strapped, that their staff is overworked, they're taking time out of their day to work with the student teams, and they don't expect a result. And they said, well, we know we're part of the teaching, And we want that these students someday are going to be our donors and leaders and volunteers. So if we're not investing in the young people, that we're not going to get that. So we have a lot of people that are willing to work with us, but they don't always expect a tangible result. And I believe that we as a community can do much better for that. If we really value and respect our partners, the first thing I've learned is being honest. So when I come out of this, just to say, these are the capabilities of the students, this is how long we can be engaged with you, to be honest up front, to let them decide if they want to be engaged. I make sure that they understand what to expect and what not to expect. I've seen a lot of community members and our partners with NGOs, they will tolerate unprofessional behavior by our students. And I will let them know that these are things I don't expect, and they're part of the teaching. The students need to learn, and I don't want them burdened. There's a very simple assessment that I will do often with our partners. I just put this spectrum. I put the effort that they put into the value that they were serving, and ask them to put an X on that. The vertical line is supposed to be in the middle. And just to say, you know, with the effort that you're putting in, how much value that you get to put out. Now, when you do this work, honestly, I've had a lot of people, especially when I was earlier in my career, it probably still happens, that when they put the effort, their X may be on the far left. And my goal is to get things where the partners are feeling like they've got more value than the effort that they're spending. I have to weigh, as an educator, right, things that I can ask of my students, what I can expect them to do. But often it's working with a partner and just looking for things of value. You know, I mentioned the schools that we work with, where we're designing the science labs and those things. These sometimes can take a long time to develop. But one of the things our students need to do is they need to interact with the young people, the students at the schools. And so sometimes we will ask the students to develop activities, hands-on activities that you can go out to the school. So my students at the university have an experience what it's like working with those students. And those kinds of things can provide value. So the teachers say, well, you know, we didn't get the product, but boy, you know, your students coming over excited the students, and again, so I'm going to move that X further to the right. There are times that we can do that. And I think that's just an important thing for us to think about. Now, on that vein, I mentioned that the Lakota people, the Glolo Lakota, have really impacted me, and they've actually given me a visual for this kind of thing. If I go back, that there are a lot of times what we do, often unintentionally, but if I look at this value and effort, what we're doing with the partner is way off to the left. And the Lakota have a name for these people. They call them white van people. See, the Lakota, there are a lot of people in my country that read about the conditions for Native Americans, and they want to feel better. So what they do is they come up with something that they want to go help those poor people. And they meet together and they decide on what they're going to do. And they want to go and they want to help the people, and then they go visit and they show up and they're going to do the thing that they decided. And really they're doing something that makes themselves feel better. They think they're doing something for good and it's going to make them feel better. And very often you will see these people posting on whatever social media, you know, Facebook, Instagram, about the things that they're doing. They may come back and post things on the website that we spent time out there. Aren't we wonderful? When they're done with their activity, they leave. And when the Lakota talk about the white van people, they come without much interaction before. They do their thing, they leave, and the Lakota don't see them again. But they return with their stories. So when I think about this work, one of the things that I think about is how do we avoid being the white band people? And some of this is not hard. It's looking at others to say, if we want to do something with them, we don't want to just think about doing a project and being gone. We want to look at, could we establish a partnership? Can we look at the people we're working with as people, not poor people that need help, but people that we can learn from also. And we look at, and I believe that this is critically important for our students. So again, the thing that this work does is I'm always connecting to things I wanted to teach students about being in industry. So as a mechanical engineer, we work with a lot of things that get machined. And I remember a machinist pulling me aside at an internship. Actually, it was right before I went to the university. And he showed me a part and he said, you're going to be a hotshot engineer. I want to show you what this idiot, or he used probably some more colorful word, engineer did to double the cost of the part. And I still remember the lesson was he was using non-standard hole sizes, so they had to do multiple machining passes. But I asked him, I said, why don't you tell the engineer that? And he said, he won't listen to me. I'm just a machinist. So the engineer there thought he was better. And then he said, and if he did take the idea, he'd claim it for himself, so I'd get no credit. When I was an engineer, when I've been a practicing engineer, one of the things that my management has commented on how I would build relationships with the workers, the secretaries, the other staff. And I was fortunate that that was a value that was instilled to me when I was growing up. And I think it's important. I think that that is one of the most important skills for engineers to learn, that can they look at others with respect and think about what I can learn from them. There are too many engineers that go out on the first day of their job and will start to tell people, like in a manufacturing setting, how to do their job when they've been doing that job longer than the young engineer's been an engineer, or maybe even been alive. These community projects provide opportunities to do that, because it's easier to say, just like the Lakota people, this Native American group, when I go through a machinist, they can also teach you things. Now, I have an agenda, and just to be honest, I believe that these kinds of things have the ability to reform our curriculum. I left the job I loved 30 years ago to improve engineering education. I've not given up on that. And I believe that these kinds of projects need to be in the curriculum, because a lot of times we do these things outside the curriculum and they're very popular. Here in the United States, Engineers Without Borders has all these chapters that are outside, and we're actually getting data on the impact that they had. But it sends a message when they're outside the curriculum that it's not real engineering, because the real engineering is taught in our classes. It also gives students time to do these projects. It gives faculty support. It allows us to craft their learning, and it can be a benefit. An example, our EPICS program, we run about 1,300 students through. We got about 130 projects. We work with other universities. Always happy to share our website. There'll be a link on the last slide, and you've got that we share the materials and found ways to put these in. There are a lot of places to put it in the curriculum. This is just an example of where our EPICS classes count at my own institution. They're an alternative for the first year. They can be used in technical electives. They can be as part of capstone. They can also fit other things. Electrical engineering uses the classes as lab credits because our students are doing hands-on things. The liberal arts uses our classes as part of the ethics and social responsibility core. College of Science has a teaming requirement and a multidisciplinary course. At the university level, there's an entrepreneurship certificate. We also, all of our students that graduate from Purdue have to take one class that's from a very long list of science, technology, and society. So our class counts for multiple things, which allow students to take it. These things look different at every institution. We've worked with other institutions to put in classes like EPICS, and I think this applies to pedagogy. It ends up being an individual conversation at each institution on how you would put this in and where to put that in. And we have some opportunities. I hope that we'll have an opportunity to workshop at the WEAF GEDC meeting and some other things. But it's just for administrators that may be on this call, it's not a plug and play that I can just drop this in. There are a lot of things to learn, but when you've learned these things and put things in place, it can have enormous potential. Now, in closing, I started with the kinds of images I get up in the morning thinking about, and just thinking of the children in some of these places. These are some of the things that I think about. And our EPICS program, I hope, makes a little dent in these kinds of things. But here's one of the mindsets that I think is a barrier for us doing some really big, meaningful things. We tend to think of programs as isolated, and we want to brag about what our programs are. And I've started to believe what our programs are, like my EPICS program, it's a puzzle piece. And if you think of a puzzle piece, I love doing puzzles, but an individual piece really isn't much. But when I start to connect it, it becomes a beautiful picture. And what we need to do is to think about how our different pieces that we're creating, the different things I might have on my campus that I could connect with other things to start to bring things together to give students a more holistic education and do this efficiently. So not creating new things, can I connect with some of the existing things? And if you do that, you start to change those images that we saw and actually make, I believe, a better world. And in the process, we're educating our future global leaders, our peacemakers, and that great generation making them world changers. I want to thank you for listening. I mentioned the EPICS courses. That's the website. If anyone would like to follow or have discussions about what this work could look like at your own institution, or if you'd be interested in investing in what we do with support, the EPICS-University at Purdue gets the MyKey staff in that area. So I think I've allowed a few minutes for questions, if we've got an opportunity to do that. Or did I lose people? How are we doing questions? Krishna,
thank you so much.
Ali?
Thank you, Professor Oakes. Yes, I think Dr. Krishna will be right back. It looks like his microphone is going in and out, so he could likely have some connectivity issues. But we will open up our questions to the audience. Please feel free to submit them through the questions portal and go to webinar. And we'll take comments, questions.
Could you not hear me?
Hi, Aliki, could you not hear me earlier?
I could not, but I hear you now, Dr. Krishna. Welcome back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that I was. Okay, I'm back, and let's see what questions we have. Okay, do you believe that faculty associated with community projects have to have certain prerequisites, passion, and commitment like you have?
Well, I started skeptical. So yeah, I think you could start with the prerequisites I had. You could start skeptical without any tangible experience in this. To be really clear, I mean, when I took this, I thought it was gonna, when I started this, it was gonna be a nice side thing. The passion is really something that I've developed in. So I don't think there's a prerequisite. I think it's easier for some. When you do this work, you've got to be willing to work with other people. You've got to be willing to learn new things, and you're going to have to be willing to tell other people you don't know. That may be the prerequisite that is hard for faculty. There are a lot of times I go into this, we get to a problem, I got to tell students I'm not sure how to do this, and we'll figure it out for that. But I think I don't think that there's any set of regular skills that you have to do.
Great. I have a question while I'm waiting for others to jump in. You have spent a lot of time with faculty in India, okay, and over the last several years. And I just want you to give me a kind of a frank opinion as to what challenges have you faced because of the culture of the institutions and the faculty in India and getting them to adopt some of these things. And I know you have faced challenges, so.
Yeah, and well, I think some of the challenges is working. The ones I see in India, I don't think are necessarily uncommon. That trying to do things different within a curriculum looks daunting. I think in India, with just some of the rules and regulations, that there's not as much freedom. I have a colleague from Australia that once said that everyone has some space to make change in a curriculum. Some people have big space, some small, and it's not as much, so it's what you do within that space. I will say one of the challenges in India, I think, is the turnover with faculty, and looking at the faculty preparation. In the United States, what's going on is we're bringing a lot more people back from industry, but not necessarily tenured faculty that have had experience doing design and project work. And I think a lot of the faculty at the institutions in India haven't had that as much experience. And so they have more to learn too, but I don't think that needs to be a barrier. I think it's perceived as a barrier. I think it's just as we look at things, we're all learning together how to do those.
Okay, next question. You mentioned integrating the curriculum very practically. What do the projects need to demonstrate, and how for institutions to be able to assign credits for them?
That's a great question, and it's an illustration of the answer. That depends on what you want them to count as. So this is where that discussion comes at the institution level, is looking at the curriculum and what outcomes could be achieved in these projects and where could these fit. That could be a complex conversation. There's some things like at our institution, we said, well, we have these technical electives, or students need to take some design. So those are easier places. Introduction to engineering course could be a place. If I look at institutions, I'll look at at Aalborg in Denmark. Half of their curriculum is project-based. And so they've assigned certain outcomes to that. There's a growing number of institutions globally that are using projects and experiences to meet outcomes. But that becomes, that's at an institution level, and what do we expect students to do? You can put small projects in traditional classes. Like if I have an introductory circuits class, maybe I have the students do a circuit for like a a toy for children with disabilities or something, that I could introduce those. But if I'm looking at the larger open-ended projects, I've got to work with the faculty to do that. And those are things that if we wanted to get in specific conversations, that we or other colleagues could work through.
Okay, this is from Natasha DiPaolo. She wants to congratulate you, Professor Wilkes, for his amazing contribution to engineering education over the years. And her question is, how are the problems identified and selected to be included in the student curricular work so that credits can be awarded towards the degree?
So that's a great question. The good news, so at our point, with our program having done this for 20 some years, we have people asking for projects and we have relationships that we have conversations with. When we're starting, it's reaching out, doing some things to just have discussions with different organizations looking for project ideas, even on our campus. Talking to local government people, identifying projects, developing larger lists, and then starting to look at the match. We look at, one of the things we look for is a committed partner, somebody who could represent that organization or community that will talk to our students. Because if we don't have that, the students can't get information. And so we're looking for people that understand that they're part of the education. We also do not say yes to every project. You've got to be willing to say no, that if there's not a right match. So we don't go to like a village and say, we're here, we're going to do any project that you want. We have a responsibility to match the projects with the academics. So there are discussions, there's getting projects, and there's a little matching that goes on. I will also tell you, when you're looking at projects, there's a trap to look at trying to do projects in the poorest of the poor area. There are times where the organization needs to have enough resources where they can interact with our students. And so it's finding the fit. So the long answer is it's having a lot of conversations, generating options, and having your criteria at your institution for what you're looking for. I mentioned being honest with the community partners. So just being honest with them up front on, this is what we're looking at. These are the types of students we think, this is the duration, and start with that conversation. Because they're gonna find it refreshing and honest and respectful.
Okay, thank you. Question from Alika, actually. In the same way that you wake up with images that might haunt you and inspire you, how do you manage and assist your students in managing their inspiration, burnout, hopelessness, everything, in a constantly moving target in the world?
You know, that is a great question. And it's one of the traps in this kind of work. I think that there are a lot of people that just get overwhelmed with the needs out there and retreat to their own little sphere. I don't have a great fix for that. We try to expose students to things that they can see. If I'm honest, there's some students that are ready to see things and accept them. Others will have the same experience that other students have had and they totally miss things. So it's having multiple opportunities for students to learn. It's being patient with students. You know, there are times when I'm frustrated that our students don't know things, but I'm reminded that they're at our institutions for us to teach them. But it is a trap in this work when you start to see the needs to get overwhelmed. And we do a lot of talking to the students to say, you know, you want to do this sustainably. So you need to figure out where you can make an impact and what your contribution can be. But there's always going to be more to do than we can do. And that's a hard thing when you're actually aware of injustice and inequity in the world. It can be overwhelming. But we want students to be engaged. We want them to lean in and to say what is their part that they're going to do. And big change, so this is a phrase I use a lot, big change happens when a large number of people do small things. And that's what we're trying to do. But it's having a lot of conversations and meeting students where they're at that time.
Okay, final comments from Hans. Come in, Hans. I have to unmute you, I think. Yeah,
Thank you.
Go ahead, Hans.
Thank Bill. Very, very inspiring. I'm very, very grateful. Just a couple. I mean, we could talk for a long time. I think a powerful comment is how we can learn from them, from the communities. Having myself worked for 25 years with NGOs in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and the capacity as you enter and work with communities to really open your minds, your hearts, to learn from those communities as you accompany them in a serious way is to be very, very, very powerful. Plus the concept of directness and honesty are very, very beautifully stated, by the way, Bill. Let me just change in terms of on behalf of both IFES and the GEDC and IUCE, who is hosting and sponsoring this webinar series that we've done over the last 2-3 years, and having a speaker like you is very inspiring. Let me just put on our radar screen our forthcoming Cape Town conference in November of IFES and GEDC, bringing together obviously professors and corporate colleagues and deans, but the engagement of students in our work increasingly, and certainly this particular presentation is a great inspiration, and we certainly want to find a way to engage you, Bill, and others in terms of our Cape Town conference. I just want to plant that seed at this particular moment. The other thing that, and working very closely with many of you, our continuing book series of Rising to the Top, written by women engineering leaders throughout the world. We just, as you know, published the Africa and India book, and we are in discussions with leaders and begun the process to write our MENA Arab World series and also Southeast Asia. And so we look forward very, very much. And another discussion, and linked to our Cape Town, the continuing interest of our industry forum, working in close partnership with the GDC, with Petra's Communication. And we are looking at this not only this year, but also hopefully next year in China. So these are just some updates to keep in mind, please, and look forward to stay in touch. And Bill, this has been a very inspirational presentation, and we will share it widely. Thank you very much, and peace be with all of you.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Aliki, and thank you all the audience. As Hans says, this world needs peace. Peace be with you. Happiness, health. Okay, everybody, take it easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.